Well, welcome. We
Welcome.
do a get to know you section where we take a couple of people from the audience and just kind of let you introduce yourself and say hello. So we'll circle back around and hear more about you and what brought you here once we get to that part.
Hi, Serena. It's Ann Trellstrom. I'm only saying hello so that you don't just have to listen to silence.
Well, thanks, Anne. I appreciate that. And I have the disadvantage of only having one screen. So if I want to share my desktop, like I can't see who's on and who's talking and all that good stuff. So
you've got it really rough.
I know, right? First world problems. But the nice thing about it is that it keeps me mobile and agile. Like I can just pick up and move and be wherever I want to be on a moment's notice.
It's winter. I don't want to go anywhere.
Well, that's true.
I am happy.
But it's kind of warm out today.
Yeah, that's going to end. Today. It's going to end. So I'm happy to stay in my office with my multiple screens.
Nice. Yeah, relatively speaking, it's warm today. Yesterday morning was -18 for anybody that isn't familiar with the lovely weather here in Minnesota. All right, I'm going to hop out of here and just take a peek and see where we're at in terms of people's 41. All right. Let's see what chats I missed.
I feel very important that my name is showing up really big.
That is
you
true.
are very important. Let's see. All right, cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for kicking things off with some social chatting and virtually and verbally. We'll go ahead and get started as we're 5 minutes into our meeting. For anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Serena Roberts, and I am co-founder of a company called Moxie Analytics. And I've been helping to run this group since the beginning of 2016. And along with a handful of other people whom I don't know if are on here or not. So we've got Katrina Johnson from Tessellation, also Luke Stanke from Tessellation, Luke Comiskey from Data Drive, and then we've got, let's see, Sam Epley also from Data Drive, and then Vince Baumel and Jim Van Sistine, who are both at Doherty Business Solutions. So you got a bunch of people working for consulting firms driving this meeting, but we do our best to keep it a sales pitch free zone. That's not what we're here for. We're all here because we truly and authentically really enjoy this community and just want to help see it grow and give back to it in any way that we can. Are any of my co-leaders on the call and would like to say a hello? I may be the only one.
I'll just say good afternoon, Brian Cariveau. I'm helping. I'm not one of the co-leads, but I'm one of your presenters today. So it's nice to see the participant list shooting up. And I put in the chat just to see where everybody works and even where people are coming in from. My brain builds a map on where everybody is. So thanks for jumping in there.
Thanks, Brian. And we appreciate you very much volunteering to present, because we don't want this to always just be a bunch of consultants talking at you guys. We are a community first group where if you have a presentation, whether it be here, why don't I just stop sharing and then you probably don't have to see all that weird stuff. Okay. Yeah, if you guys have a presentation, big or small, long or short, formal or informal, reach out to me or any one of the other co-leaders. I think we have presenters lined up all the way through March, which is like really amazing. So thank you very much to those of you guys who have helped put that together so far. But we are hoping to get our April, May, and June tugs, at least some people penciled in. So if you've got something, let me know. Or if you have questions, if you're nervous about what it's like to present here, also reach out to me. Happy to talk about it. All right, let me go back to my screen share here and we'll pick back up on the presentation. Okay, so last call. Would love to get your guys' opinion on whether or not it would be worth it to try to do a hybrid meeting in March. So would be great, but if there's going to be like 5 or 10 people there, we might as well just skip it and take those 5 or 10 people out to lunch somewhere. I did chat the link in the chat in case you missed it. I think it's like the very first chat, so scroll all the way up to the top. Okay, well, welcome to January 2022, everybody. Here's to hoping that this year is different than the last 2, right? Today's agenda, welcome. We checked that box. We're going to take a pit stop on our Get to Know a Member section where we just, we can take volunteers from the audience, or I will just randomly pick somebody to answer a few questions about yourself and say hello to everyone else on the call. And then Brian, who's already introduced himself, has graciously volunteered to give his presentation called Driven by Design. And Brian joins us from United Health Group, which, by the way, Kelly over at Tableau had the sweetest reaction to any that I've ever seen anyone have to someone mentioning that they worked for United Healthcare. She was like fangirling over Brian because he worked at United Healthcare, which is super cute.
It was excellent.
What's that?
I said it was excellent. It was a great response.
It was. I'm sure you don't get that every day, do you?
No.
All right. And then so after Brian, you get me. I'm going to give a not very long presentation on 5 myths about enabling a data culture. And then we can have some discussion around that. And then always as just sort of a placeholder agenda item, we leave time for the best thing I learned or group therapy. And this is where today, I actually learned a really cool tip that helps with when you need to design a mobile version of a dashboard that's drastically different than your desktop version. So if there's time, I might just share that with you guys at the end. If you guys, anyone else has super cool tip that they learned recently, I encourage you guys to share that. And then the group therapy piece of it is because there are times when I find myself struggling with something, and what better way to try to find a solution to it than crowdsource an answer from this smart community. So we'll get to those things as long as we have time, but if not, I promise I won't make you guys hang out into your afternoons to cover that. All right. Before we get to our get to know a member, just a quick highlight list of events coming up. There's Power BI meetup on February 2nd. There's a February hack night of the Women Who Code group. She Talks Data on 2022. That one's going to be super fun. We've got a professional stylist coming in to give tips about, how do you dress quote unquote professionally, but also be really authentic to yourself. So sign up for that if you are interested. February TC Tug is already scheduled. You may remember that we did we'll call it a Viz Games because, for lack of something better to call it, where we had 2 teams and they, one person was giving, just describing the kind of dashboard that the other person needed to build. So, and then we compared the two, and it was super fun. Anyway, so Luke Stanke is going to run another Viz Games in February. And then we also have our March Tug plan for the 24th, and we have at least one presentation lined up already. One will be from Paula Lindgren, who is a biostatistician at the state of Minnesota, and she's going to showcase a dashboard, a public-facing dashboard that they built. And then lastly is a Power BI showcase on 3/31. So these are just like a smattering. This is absolutely not an all-inclusive list of all the events that we've got going on, but this is just a cherry-picked, smattering of what's available. So if there, if there is something an event that you know about or event that you're putting on that's not on this list, now is your moment to unmute yourself and shout it out. Also, if you have an open rec, if you're hiring for a particular role, we encourage those things to be shared in this space as well. So I'll be quiet for a moment and see if anyone would like to share.
Serena, this is Ann Chalstrom again. We do still have an open data analyst position at BI Worldwide, and Tableau experience would be greatly valued. We've been having some trouble finding someone. So if there's someone that's interested, feel free to reach out to me, or you can look at if you want more information, you can look at the BI Worldwide career site.
Awesome. Have you posted the link in the Tableau user group?
I think I did a while ago. I reached out to you. I think you put it there actually for me.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
But I will, during the call, I'll try to see if I can find the direct link to it on the careers page and put it in the chat.
Perfect. Otherwise, people can reach out to you directly?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
I got a text today.
Anybody else have anything?
I did raise my hand, but I don't know if just unmute
Sorry,
and talk.
I'm
You're fine.
screen sharing and I can't see it.
I figured. My name is Charlie Kuklins. I'm a BI architect here at Arctic Wolf in Eden Prairie. We have a rec coming up for another BI person to come onto the team. I don't know if it's open yet, but it will be coming in the next couple of weeks. So when I see that pop up, I'll definitely shoot it out to the group, but just wanted to make people aware.
Awesome. Yeah, share that out with the Tableau user group on LinkedIn. We could also send out an email to those who have subscribed to be part of this group as well. And then just a quick reminder, if you're not actively talking and participating in the conversation, if you would keep yourself on mute just to reduce background noise for those of us that are.
Yeah, it's fine.
Right. I think there's somebody who may not know that they're unmuted right now. Okay, anybody else have anything to share? Okay, now we'll go to get to know a member, and maybe we'll circle back around to Rebecca. Rebecca, would you like to formally introduce yourself to the group?
Sure, why not?
Awesome. Yeah, don't feel like you have to touch on every single one of these, but this is just sort of a guide of, what you could share with us.
Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Newman. I work for Collins Aerospace as a data analyst, looking at workflow data, essentially analyzing where things are in the process, how much work is in the particular type of workflow. I've been using Tableau for a little over 2 years, I think. And I actually recently started streaming on Twitch doing Tableau. So that's been kind of fun.
That's awesome. Isn't that so I have an almost 21-year-old. That's like a gaming thing, right?
It is. It's a platform that's meant for streaming games, but I have decided that my niche is going to be streaming spreadsheets and data dashboards and all those sorts of things.
I love that, Rebecca. Do you have to have a Twitch account to watch those?
You do not have to have a Twitch account to watch people streaming on Twitch, no.
Okay. Well, send us a link. I would love to check that out.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. Is there
And when
anything in
I
particular
stream
that-
as, what's that?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
The tuber, I don't know if anyone has heard of that, but I have an animated character on the screen instead of myself. So that's how I get that's how I get them. You see the screenshot of what's streaming and they're like, oh, that looks interesting.
That's awesome. That's super creative. Do you feel like, I mean, other than just being a marketing genius over there, Rebecca, is there anything about Tableau that you feel like you're particularly good at or that you particularly struggle with, having been doing it for 2 years?
I think what I'm good at is that I'm curious about how all of it works. So I'm not tied down to any particular format of always using a bar chart or a column chart or a scatter plot or whatever. I don't have that rigidness, I guess. So I consider that a strength.
Yeah.
But I think that I'm definitely going to learn some places that I struggle with because I'm planning on submitting something for the Iron Viz qualifier. So I'll find out what I struggle with. But I think that like the design elements of like white space and flow and stuff are places that I need to improve.
Well, this girl does not lack in confidence. Let me tell you that. I just love it. And so you saw the last Iron Viz challenge where like for the first time ever, a woman won it. Was that did that inspire you?
I don't know. I don't know if that particularly inspired me, but I feel like since I've been doing it for a while, there's no harm in trying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the gal who won, somebody remind me of her name. It was Lisa something, right? I'm so incredibly terrible with names, so I'm hoping somebody can help me out.
I think so.
Yeah, it was Lisa something. Anyway, she had like literally only been using Tableau for like, it was definitely not more than a year. It might have even been like 6 months, something like that. It was just crazy. Anyway, fabulous. Well, welcome to the crew, Rebecca. What took you so long to get here?
I didn't really know that it existed. So after the at my company, there's basically 4 people I think in my locality that use Tableau, and none of them are in the same department as me. So I've kind of like been the one person jumping into all the Tableau community stuff, and the conference I think really helped push me to be more involved with the community. So they actually interviewed me in an article about first-time attendees, but I requested that they use my VTuber name instead of my name. So I'm listed in that article as Dataco.
I love it. Are you local to the Twin Cities area?
Yeah, I live in Shakopee.
Okay, awesome. Well, I hope to meet you in person someday soon. Thank you for it always takes one person to just kind of get things going. Let's do we have another volunteer? And try not to just like, if you raise your hand, I can't see it right now because I'm screen sharing. So if you would like to participate in this, get to know a member, just just say hello and start talking.
I'll go. My name's Kim Katzmeyer. I work for Salesforce. I am a director of delivery services. So we implement specifically in the higher education and the nonprofit space. I'm just learning Tableau. It's now that there's the two companies have come together, we have some trainings that I'm going through and just trying to learn. And I live out in Vadnais Heights, Minnesota, so kind of out by White Bear Lake. I worked at Slalom with Luke Stanky, so thought I would stop in and see what this is all about.
We weren't there at the same time, were we? At Slalom?
I don't think so. I must have left before you joined. I've been at Salesforce for 3 years.
Okay, yeah. So you were Salesforce before it was Tableau Salesforce. Had you used Tableau at all before that?
No. I used to watch Luke. He used to do all of the the Sweet 16 and all of those. But I was in the Salesforce group. I was the third one hired in that group, and so we just it's something I've always wanted to dig into, and now that being in leadership, with revenue and bookings and those kind of things, I would like to start using Tableau to kind of help spin up some dashboards that are useful.
Awesome.
So I wouldn't say I'm good at anything yet. I'm learning, and just like I said, going through the trainings, I use it for, like I was saying, some of the data we have here in our group, but also using it to connect my Peloton data and my Strava data, and kind of having fun with public Tableau and looking at dashboards and retrieving them and trying to learn that way a little bit also.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Start with like data that you care about and that you already have some hypotheses about. That's awesome. Well, welcome to the club. We're happy to have you. Okay, let's see, 2:55. We probably should get rolling, so I make sure that I give Brian enough time. So Brian, if you are prepared, I can stop sharing and let you take over. Otherwise, we can do another get to know a member if you need a few minutes.
I am prepared. So let's do it.
All right, let's do this. All right, everybody, welcome Brian.
Let me get my screen share up. And as I'm getting that up, I did a little bit of an intro. I'm at United Health, coming up on 3 years here. I was at Wells Fargo prior to that. And before Wells Fargo, I worked for a lot of different small entrepreneurial companies as I was chasing my wife around the United States with her training for her career. And I would say, even kind of looking at some of the Meet the Member questions, my team uses Tableau at United Health. I also think of myself kind of as a operations type of a leader that just happens to have been stuck in data for almost my entire career, which is coming up on 20 years now. I used to build a lot of reports back in the day. I still can't keep my fingers out of the reports and the data, which I know sometimes probably drives my team crazy, but it helps keep me fresh and on the front with probably a lot of people like all of you that are really trying to drive a lot of change. So let's dive right in. What I'm going to talk to you about today, I'm not going to teach any Tableau tips and tricks, right? I think this is relevant. Independent of what tool you're using. If you work in this industry, I think this is a very relevant topic. And I've seen people supercharge their solutions in their careers by working a little bit differently with some of these techniques. So let's dive right in, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. I'm just going to start with a question for the group. And I'm going to try to pull the chat box up so I can see if people are responding in chat.
I'll help you too, Brian.
Who loves documentation? Anybody raising their hand? Who loves requirements? Anybody? Oh, Rebecca, she's the unicorn, I guess. There's a few hands raising. There you go.
I mean, I love when it's done.
You love when it's done. That's a lot of people, right? They love when it's done. So I hope some people chuckled behind their camera. And I have a confession to start this with. I love documentation. I love it. But you really need to redefine documentation between your ears in the way that I'm going to talk about it with all of you here. I'm going to ask another question. Let's get some more hand raises. What percentage of people, raise your hand, that when you're asked to build a new solution, they give you all the details you need to build it, right? Tell you exactly what you need to build. Does that ever happen?
No.
I see a couple head shakes. I would say the odds are extremely low that someone's ever going to ask you to build exactly what they need. Let's keep pulling the thread a little bit. You know, what if I told you that if you just answered a couple simple questions and you used a template-driven design, you can get from an original ask to a real solution in less than a day. Some of you might look at me like this strange guy on the right-hand side of the screen. And I'm going to let my dog out of my office. I heard dogs and kids are fair game on this meeting.
100%, Brian.
I really think this whole documentation thing is a little bit easier than anybody is cracking it up to me. So let me jump into a little story for all of you. Okay. So this is Brian. Meet Brian. This is him. Brian works for a healthcare company. You know, last I heard, healthcare is ripe with data, just like every industry. And he wants to be a part of transforming the industry with data. Brian hates documentation. He hates it. And at the end of the day, he actually just never has time to do it, right? We never have time. It's like the last step. We didn't create our documentation. And Brian just couldn't understand why people just kept asking him for the data. Why do you ask me for the data? I can do so much more. It drives me crazy. So let's jump over to Marcos. Marcos runs a call center. And Marcos wants to know which of his call center advocates need some training, right? And Marcos called Brian up and he said, hey, I just need the data. I need the data so I can figure this out. Right? And maybe Marco's ask was associated with, I need data from the system, I need these tables, I need these columns, whatever it may be, right? But Marcos was pretty sure he just needed the data. And at the end of the day here, Marcos actually does understand clearly what he wants to do. He wants to help train his advocates to do a better job answering the phones. But I can tell you, Marcos really has no idea what's possible in a more progressive business intelligence landscape. So he just wants the data so he can try to answer these questions about the people that work in the call centers throughout his organization. And I'll say one of the quotes that I love. Marcos does not know what he wants until he sees what he wants. Nobody knows what they want until they see what they want. He knows what he wants to do. That's why he wants the data. It's going to help him see for himself what maybe he wants to find. But you know what? Brian fought his urge to just give Marcos the data. And he just said, hey, can we have a quick chat? What are you trying to accomplish? That very brief chat, you know, Brian showed Marcos some different possibilities. Maybe he demoed some existing solutions. There's a bit of an aha moment where Marcos was like, maybe I want that. And it started steering things down a path where Brian was able to quickly develop a solution and make it easy for him to answer just that simple question: who may need training? And some of this was founded, and let me get a little bit deeper into it now, in design thinking. People that have studied design thinking are probably this will look familiar. If I think of this in the lens of business intelligence, the space that a lot of you either work directly in or help to lead, understand your user. Like I'm talking to Marcos. He wants to understand stuff about call centers. You want to understand their needs. This is way simpler than we give it credit for. To me, defining, understanding needs is down those key questions on the right. Who's going to use it? What are they trying to do? What questions are they trying to answer? What actions might they be taking? Just answering those two questions starts opening the door for you to start ideating, unleashing some creativity, having some fun. I just saw a video Serena posted of her drawing a dashboard. I'm assuming that was probably fun, like just drawing it out and getting creative. I love that you had all your colored pencils on the table. Like it just, have fun, And ideally, when you are creating, what's that?
It was the most fun part of the whole process.
It's the most fun part. And you know what? To me, a mock-up is documentation. Fun.
100%.
Start iterating on that prototype that has no data in it. Totally fake, right? How much data was under your drawing, Serena? How much time did you have to spend piping your drawing to the actual database tables? Zero. None. And eventually that prototype is going to turn into an actual prototype in Tableau, Power BI, or whatever your tool is. All of you are using Tableau. You're going to start iterating on the actual solution in Tableau. But you've already got a direction set, because hopefully early on in that prototyping stage, Marcos said, I want that. Okay? Not dissimilar from, you go to a car dealership and you drive cars and you look through the showroom, and eventually you have this emotional reaction of, I want that one. Right? You actually want that emotional reaction to what you're showing people. So, how this all plays out is loosely based on a true story here. Call centers Marco manages just continues to have great NPS scores, and people love working for Marcos. Marcos actually no longer needs those, closet analysts that are hidden under some other job title that are continually exporting data from solutions and playing with them to try to answer questions for Marcos. He gets to answer them on his own now. And Brian, and in this fictitious story, it is not me that won an enterprise data viz contest, but one of the people that I know that follows this process the most did just win an enterprise data viz contest at UHG with a team. And only a few years before that, she only knew Excel. It's almost the same story as the person who just won Iron Viz. And at the end of the day, she's on a career fast track and is helping to improve the literacy of the org at a rapid clip. And this actually is, I'll say, loosely based on a true story. It is a very close to a true story. So let's get into what this actually looks like a little bit from a process standpoint. Stop talking about Brian and Marcos a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's no surprise that Brian uses a template to guide his designs. A couple links down at the bottom here that I love from a reference standpoint. But one, the majority of analytics projects fail. You've probably all heard that. I think the statistic is around 80%. One of the reasons in the top 5 reasons analytics projects fail is we just start playing with the data. We're dealing with data quality issues. We start interrogating the data. We may just send people the data. People almost always ask for the data. And there are infinite ways to build a solution. But there is a very powerful thing that happens when you constrain creativity And I'm going to talk about how I'd recommend you do this in you personally becoming a bit more driven by design. And here's the overall process. Then I'm going to get into kind of some artifacts you can build to help you along the way. You know, the most important thing is to shorten the time until you show somebody a mock-up. I always say it should happen in the first day. Because as soon as you do, you anchor their brain into a direction you can go. And one of my bosses, one of my mentors at a point in time, he used to talk about the early ugly. You know, share the early ugly. Pop it up, get somebody's reaction, see what they react to. And initially you start just iterating on that design. Again, no data. Do not get sucked into playing with data. And eventually you're going to feel that design is pretty good and you're going to start iterating on an actual solution. And in doing so, you just happen to build some really good documentation, and I'll show you some of the recommendations I would guide people to use in doing this. But again, the most important thing to do is you want to anchor somebody in a direction. The more you're talking and putting stuff on paper and creating Excel documents and data mapping diagrams and all sorts of things, people are starting to build a picture in their head. And eventually you might get stuck to their picture. You are probably the expert in what can be built. And I would say at the end of the day, this is easier than you think. And you should not stop at a UI from a visual artifact perspective. And you don't have to overthink this. A couple questions. Who's going to use it? What are they going to use it to do? And no, you do not need a business analyst to do this for you. I have fought with peer leaders in my organization saying, oh, we really need BAs in front of our UI developers. Really? I don't think so. I think this is easier than we give it credit for. And what we've done is go out on the internet and pick a dashboard layout. There's only 1,000 of them, but just pick one. This is actually the one I've used in the past to guide our layout. It's from the SideSense website. Once you've picked the layout, build a mock-up template. We just use PowerPoint Visio in the organizations I've worked in. Actually, Visio is harder. PowerPoint seems a little bit more relatable to people. So you build that kind of shell template in PowerPoint with a bunch of things that people can copy and paste in, example charts and example dashboards that might have been well received. And again, don't stop at the UI. So also visually think about the data under the UI. Not before you prototype, but when you start to build, once you have that mock-up figured out, that visual, the guiding light of where you're going to go, you can start mapping out visually a data flow diagram where your data prep layer is going to be, where your logic's going to be, and you can start to enrich a bunch of information into that diagram visually that becomes very easy to understand. I'm going to pause here and spend a little bit of time. Let's say this is not fully baked out, right? And this is using the sample data from Tableau and our mock-up in the upper left, right? Who's going to use it? Regional sales managers. What are they going to use it to do? Well, they want to understand total sales. How much money did we make? What are our sales split by category? Where do we have the most returns? What are some of the transaction level details? That's the mock-up we put together. And that's a data flow we built when we thought about, in our organization, where this data might come from and what that might look like as we start to get the data from the source to the UIs. And, so I'd pause there. I mean, go in the chat, or who could start building this? If I gave you this, couple answers, that mock-up and that data flow diagram, who could start building it? And what can you also understand just from looking at these couple visual artifacts? Feel free to jump off mute or.
Brian, maybe we ask people if how many people wish they got something like this from their stakeholders instead of what they actually get.
What's funny is, so the partners we have matured the most with, some of them actually start coming to the table with their request with a picture that actually is in our template. Those are the very advanced ones. But a lot of times we're building this in partnership with our partners, right? And we don't get to the data flow diagram again until someone says, I want that. That's when we start talking about, all right, where's this data going to come from to actually support this thing? And I have used data flow diagrams. I mean, I layered in a couple things here, right? What's the source name? What's the type? Who's the owner? What are we using for ETL? Where's some of that integration of the data happening? I've personally used data flow diagrams that have 10 pieces of information on top of every icon to pass really rigorous audits with the federal government. Like it really helps to visually understand it versus having documentation, a Word document full of words, or an Excel document that has some weird source to target mapping or whatever it may be that people often do.
Brian, I would say in our case that some of our challenges are that what you want to know is not as obvious or clear as you would have in, other situations like sales or something like that. But I do think that having a layout even is helpful. And you talk about like bands and like, what are the top 5 like numbers you want to just have available right away? And, what are the comparisons that you might want to do? And would this type of view give you those kind of comparisons? So I still think that you could use this kind of approach, even if you didn't have any clarity around what they think they want to know.
You are spot on. And I talked before about constrained creativity. There are constraints here. I personally measure what % of my team's dashboards and solutions match our template. But it constrains the conversation. It puts lanes on the road. And even in those situations, Dan, one of the things that I found is, let's go after question 2 here, right? What are people trying to do? What are you trying to do, right? Usually someone can give you at least one answer to that to start.
Yeah, and I never accept their first answer, because what would you do with that?
Yeah.
What would you do with that? What would you do with that? It's really 4 questions down.
Yep, you keep pulling. It's like the 5 whys, right? But all you need is like an inkling of a direction, and then some of these constraints around the template to start steering that conversation down a particular path, and you can really start to get to a rich spot of where the direction is going to go. And what's interesting, I mean, there's some articles on teaching how to ask good questions, but the more questions you're asking, it's actually a trust build with whoever you're working with. So just by having that dialogue and asking the questions, they trust you more. And they trust that you are going to build something for them that could work out quite well. Any other questions or thoughts? Just on this page in general, or anything I've covered up to this point?
I have one, Brian.
Yep.
So do you feel like it changes the process at all when, because sometimes there are hard limitations on the data, right? Like the kind of data that you can get. And I find myself, when I work with large organizations where, when I ask the question, do you have the data to support this? Like the answer is almost always yes. But I also work with much smaller companies where it's like, here's the data we have. What can you do, right? Do you feel like the process is essentially the same, whether you take a look at what the data can support first, or worry about that sourcing after the fact?
I think the process is certainly helped if someone has some domain knowledge of how good the data might be in that space, right? Because you will start making certain trade-offs and decisions in your mock-up based on your knowledge of, hey, I know we have X, Y, Z. I know even in this really simple example, right? If I know the sample data set under Tableau and I know there's category, then I can put a chart in here that shows that there's category. I mean, so that helps. But I do think, I mean, we have found areas where we build something visually and we get down to it and we're like, we
Can't do it.
you know, we can see nuggets of the data in the app, right? But when we look at this in aggregate, it's garbage. And so if you want this, you got to go clean up the data over here. Then we might be able to do it. And so it has gotten to points where some of those conversations happen. And in certain cases, it motivates them to be a part of cleaning stuff up. In certain cases, it's like, I guess we're just not going to do that, right? But I do think the macro idea that the more you talk about data early on is a trap. It's a trap. And we all do it in this industry. And you can get all wound around the axle there and you don't even know what you're building yet. You don't even know if you need 10 columns of data or 1,000 columns of data, you know, because you don't truly know what product you're building. You can't see it.
I would also say that you have to continuously steer people away from going to talk about dimensions and metrics. And I also find it really helpful to ask them, what do your bosses ask you? Because the questions that they want to answer may not be the same questions that their bosses want to answer, which is probably what they really need to get to.
Yep.
Okay. This is
well, and some of it, I would say, oh, go for it.
Yeah, this is Jim. I'll piggyback on that. And one lens that I've found really useful working with any kind of system that converts data into insight is to focus on what are the actionable decisions that the user wants to be able to make, right? So it's the so what question. So you have a great dashboard. It provides insight, for example, in this case, you know, descriptively in terms of, you know, historical sales, let's say, right? But if you thought about that and said, okay, what kind of a springboard could this be to make a forward change? So for example, geographically, where aren't we selling? Where's that white space, right? How could we best penetrate that? Or product mix wise, this is our mix today. What could we predict consumer or customer response would be if we altered the product mix, right? So now you take a forward lens predictively. And so if you have that long view in mind, that can oftentimes set a really nice foundation for how you describe the current state.
Absolutely.
The only other thing I would add is that
Meg.
I try to make sure that if we put something in a dashboard, you know that you'd be able to take action on it, because otherwise it's just interesting.
Agreed. And I'm also going to pile on to a quote from Megan in the chat. And I'll even take that one a lot further. I love the question. When you sit down on your computer, why did you open this dashboard? And then even as a follow-up, and what did you do? We're re-engineering a solution right now. It's a Tableau dashboard. But when my team went and sat down with one of the said users of the dashboard, she went on to show this elaborate process of how she exports the data and mashes it with other stuff in Excel and does this like half an hour process every day. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make your life easy because you don't have to do any of that. You know, so that idea of like sitting down and watching what people do with the solutions can be fascinating. And it can really help to transform somebody's life that might, you know, they're doing all sorts of goofy stuff because they don't know what's possible. You know, we thought we met their need when it was built, but maybe not. So I'll close out here. At the end of the day, I have another confession. I completely copied this presentation from the template, almost verbatim. So if you go out to that Make Ideas Stick presentation, Marcos is in there. not Brian. I'm not in the template. Meet Brian, but Marcos is definitely in there. So if you can't tell, I like some constrained creativity even in the presentation here before you. And I really think this is pretty simple. Find a template you like, make a mock-up tool in a Tableau template. Try it again, try it again, try it again. Once you get 2, 3, 4 times in, you will not go back. And I would also say, in this crazy virtual world that we all live in, and this is on my talk with my team a lot about, especially in those times that you're talking about a mock-up, do it on video. Just so normalized in the culture to just be on the phone. Maybe that's only in big companies like I work in, but any big company I've ever worked for, it's so normalized to just stay on the phone. And I always like to ask people, and I'll ask all of you, has anyone ever done a FaceTime with your family during the pandemic? Anyone? Maybe. Why do you use FaceTime? Why don't you just call them? Because there's a different connection. We can actually look at someone in the face. And I would say pulling off this process without looking someone in the eye, without being able to see their nonverbal cues, when you pull the mock-up up for the first time and you start talking through it, without that, it's very hard. With that, it starts to become very easy. And I personally, and my own team, work a lot with getting people comfortable to be on video. But I think it is extremely important to be effective at doing something like this. So that's all I got. Final questions from anybody? Comments? You guys can certainly reach out to me if you want to beat up any of these topics in more detail. I'll throw my LinkedIn profile in the chat, and I'll also plug that Serena, you brought up earlier, does anybody have any jobs? We have a couple data jobs in the Tableau space that just opened up, and I work on a very large team at United Health, and we often have jobs. And I would say that the company is one where you truly can come in if you want to push the envelope with data and be a part of transforming healthcare. So even if it's, people interested from a career standpoint, certainly let me know. But any final questions?
I think this is really helpful, and I completely agree that it's better to not start with the data, but I've never thought of using a template for how you lay out a dashboard to facilitate that conversation, and I think that's such a great idea. I also wanted to mention that the analytics user group had a speaker a couple months ago that talked about how to build a layout for a dashboard without even having data, which I thought was really smart and a really great option that I had never thought of. So I think that that's worth going back and looking at if you guys haven't watched that. That could be helpful in how you build the template, and you could, just put in images even, and then you don't even have to have data.
Well, and even to that point, Ann, the people, even the fake person that won the Enterprise Dataviz contest, she no longer does fake mockups. She knows the data so well that she's building a UI mockup with real data within day one.
Right. And if you can do it with
so
data,
that's,
yeah.
Yeah. And so people that get really good at it progress to that. But it's less about building a solution. It's still this idea that we're spitballing here, right? I have no idea if any of this stuff is going to work. And the more you're kind of that mindset, when you're in the early ugly stage, you're probably doing it right. If you think you've got it figured out, you're probably missed.
And they have a vested interest in making sure that the design is done correctly if they're involved in that process versus they ask you for something, you go and build something, it's not what they wanted, they can blame you.
Exactly. And the last thing I'd throw out there is, those couple more baked out just for representation purposes, the data flow diagram and the UI diagram. I mean, our documentation essentially our documentation. So you built it as a part of the process. So then you're done and you have this rich document that explains what was done. You have these versions of that document that talks about the journey to get there, that now you have really great reference documentation if somebody knew how to support it or whatever it may be, instead of getting to the end of a solution build and being like, oh, I really have to build a document to explain this thing. That's not fun. So you build it as you go. All right, I'll hand it back to you, Serena. Again, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you have any questions, comments, you want to trade some war stories, whatever it may be.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. That was really great. You know, I think it would be fun to do in a future presentation to see like how, like the idea of using like a standardized template in Tableau. Like, you know, I've worked in Power BI and some other tools, and I have found that like Tableau makes it just a little bit harder to say, hey, like here, I want to create this like sort of starter workbook for anything that anyone's going to build in Tableau. So they're not starting from scratch and they can, you know, adhere to like design standards and all that stuff. So if anybody has like some good practices or good examples of how they have done that, I'd love to see it. And I'm sure the rest of the crew would. So look me up if you got something like that.
And real quick on that point, Serena, so on the slide that I showed, like the SciSense dashboard, and then it has kind of a PowerPoint tool in the middle, I think one of those images is an actual Tableau template that I've used with teams that just has boxes for where certain things would go. And so it actually is the template that we have people use as a starter.
That's awesome. I've tried to do that, and just like a little bit of a tangent here, and like things always get reshuffled, you know, like you'll move one thing in and one thing out, and then it's like, oh, damn it. Now I gotta like, what was the height of this supposed to be again? And I don't know. So just, you know, pro tips on that kind of thing would be super awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Brian. Great presentation. Really well received. So now I get to follow that up. And I'm going to ask somebody who is not afraid to interrupt me to keep an eye on the chat, because as I'm sharing my screen, like I won't be able to see any of that. So if I could have someone who doesn't care, like who's okay with interrupting me and just hollering that there's a question or whatever, that would be great. So I don't want to miss any of that dialogue. Do I have a volunteer?
I will be happy to interrupt you, Serena.
And yes, love it. Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen and open up the correct slideshow. All right, can everybody see this? See my screen?
Yes.
All right, good. All right, so today I'm going to talk about these 5 myths about enabling a data culture. And so first and foremost, this isn't going to be a super long presentation because I'm a pretty concise person and I don't like to belabor points, but I absolutely welcome any like dialogue or conversation, you know, thoughts that you have in agreement or disagreement with anything that you see here. Because I think data culture can mean different things. Like it's, you know, can mean different things for different organizations, and they can have different definitions of success and all that good stuff. So it is a little bit of an ambiguous topic, but because of that, my first slide is just kind of like, let's level set on what is a data culture. What do I mean by that? So the best definition that I come up with is actually a kind of a version of what Tableau has put out there. Essentially, it's a workhorse that is enabled to value, practice, and encourage the use of data to improve decision-making for the benefit of the company. Does anybody, like, are we in agreement that this is a fairly widely accepted definition of a data culture? is there anything that's, glaringly missing from this definition that anyone would like to call out?
We have no comments, so
Okay.
perhaps that is just agreement.
I shall take your silence as agreement. So if we're in agreement that this is what we're talking about here, this is the goal, right? When people say, I want to enable a data culture in my organization, that this is what they're talking about. So if we're in agreement with that, then these next 5 myths should be very relevant. So let's get into myth number 1. Myth number 1, you must have executive sponsorship. So I'll admit that this one it's a little bit true, but mostly false. It's definitely false in the sense that you need executive sponsorship to start, right? I've seen organizations that say, you know what, I want to start a data culture enablement initiative. Like, let's go find some executive sponsors. Let's get a budget. Let's interview some vendors. Let's create a communication plan. Like, let's plan this all out. And then they sit there and they spin their wheels because, they can't find the right executive sponsor. They don't have the funding for this big, huge thing. Whatever the reasons might be, they end up spinning their wheels and oftentimes never starting or starting much later than they would have anticipated. And, they're trying to sort of turn the Titanic, and it eventually ends in some level of failure. The reason why I think that this is a myth and that you don't need executive sponsorship to start is because there are huge benefits in taking a grassroots approach to this, right? Start small. Put a plan together, right? Like, it's almost like the sort of design thinking that Brian was talking about. It's like, start with what you think is going to do the trick. Take a couple of pilot cohorts through it, get some feedback, iterate on it, use that time and that experience to gauge interest in the content, to refine your message, to refine the competencies that you're trying to teach. And by the time that you've ironed out a lot of those kinks, it makes it so much easier to go to your executive sponsors, whoever they might be, and say, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we have seen from our initial start. And you just have a clearer, cleaner message, a clearer, cleaner ask, all around, from a budget standpoint, from a scope standpoint. So my recommendation is actually to start without the highest levels of executive sponsorship within an organization. Do some of that work first, work those kinks out. Has anybody had success or failures with trying this one way or the other that they'd like to share?
I don't think we've had either yet, but I think we have hesitated. There's a group of us who wish that we could make progress, but we've probably hesitated to start, feeling that we didn't have an executive sponsor. And yep. I think it's a really good point to gather some data and refine your approach before you try to get one on board.
Yep. Yeah, it's much cheaper too, right? You might find that you're not ready for it. Right? You might find that either, from a maturity standpoint, the org's just not ready. You might find that you don't have a great executive sponsorship candidate, and maybe you need to wait for some org change to happen, and the path might be clearer. So yeah. Anybody else want to comment? All right.
We have a couple of comments from those who are not as comfortable interrupting me. So one comment was that the "we've always done it this way" crowd needs to get out of the way if you want a data culture. Data is always changing. And then my company has communities of practice, but outside of meetings, there's really no interaction. They created a team for Tableau champions, and I'm trying to get people to be more active in it as a forum.
Yep. Yeah, that is a struggle for sure. But consistency is the key, and it's something that I think we as an external community struggle with also. And our biggest, most important thing is that we have said that we're going to meet every month outside of the month that the Tableau conference is in, and we have stuck to that because consistency is the most critical aspect of that. So just keep going, keep doing it. Okay, let's move on to myth number 2. There we go. Myth number 2, you have to have all the fancy tools. I think this probably won't shock you, right? This is false. The tools don't really matter when your goal is to change processes and human behavior, right? Sure, it's nice to have Tableau and Alteryx and all of these nice things that can do fancy, cool stuff. But at the end of the day, this is about changing people, changing the behavior of people and the way that they think and the processes that are in place within your organization. And as long as you have something like Excel, you can build out a data literacy program. You can enable a data culture because it's the thinking and the processes around that. It's not the tool. The tools are essentially irrelevant. I will say that the tool matters in that when you are developing content for your program, that content needs to be specific to the tool that you're using, as well as like the data sources that you have available and how they're going to access that, whether or not they're going to be able to join data and all those kinds of things. So the training itself needs to be specific to the tools that you have and your technology infrastructure. But at a macro level, the tools do not matter.
Someone made a comment that it helps if you can download them for free at first, like Tableau Public. And I would just add to that maybe you can use those tools to try to make your point about what you could do if you were using data in a more effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you've got an organization that's completely new to any kind of data visualization tools and they're just, right, like they're stuck in their Excel spreadsheets, you can start a data culture enablement program. And then once they've sort of bought into this idea that there's a better way to do it, you already have this ground, this community established to start trying out, like, hey, Power BI is included in a lot of people's Microsoft Enterprise licensing. And then, there's Tableau Public and some ways to kind of dip your toe in those waters to see if the organization is ready, and just to, maybe do some proof of concepts on what can be done in a tool set like that versus Excel. Absolutely. All right, myth number 3. Myth number 3, generic data literacy programs will do. I gave this one away in the last myth a little bit, but just to drive that point home, I mean, any data literacy program is better than none. However, they can be really costly, and when you're paying, per person, or just a giant amount of money for your workforce to access like super basic analytics 101, like don't sum and average kind of things. At the end of the day, when it comes time to put that learning into practice and your training content didn't take into account the tools that they that are available to them, the data landscape within which they interact, and not only that, like risk tolerance level, right? Like, are you like working on a project right now that's mostly public data, and even then, like as a vendor, like I wasn't allowed to have direct access to that database, or healthcare data, where there's PII or PHI, right? You have to understand the risk tolerance within that organization around the different types of data that are being used. So when that's not part of when that's not considered or included in the training content that gets developed, at the end of the day, when they go to actually put that stuff in practice, they are, it's like 25% of the problem, right? They're still going to trip up on like, well, how do I do that here, right? How do I do that in this instance? And how do I do that in this instance and make sure that I'm in compliance with our, with our risk and data security rules? So in my experience, it is far more effective and a far better return on investment when you develop training that is customized to your organization's unique situation. But I'd love to hear if anyone else has found some generic data literacy training that they have seen some success with. I should add a prove me wrong to each one of these myths. No comments coming through, Anne?
No. All quiet on the comment front.
All right. Okay, myth number 4. Data governance is a separate thing. So some of you might know that my business partner, the co-founder of Moxie Analytics, she's written a couple books on data governance. And so if there's one thing that I have learned from Laura Madsen, it's that data governance is not a separate thing from data literacy or enabling a data culture. It is actually a critical component, because what happens when you have hundreds or thousands of people looking at your data? They're going to find all the errors, and what you have just done is mobilized a sizable workforce that could do a better job at finding issues with the data, right? Increasing data quality than a dedicated team of data governance folks could ever do, right? And it's, of course, it's not their day job, right? But you build in the processes for these people. Well, you set the expectation, right, that you're gonna find issues with the data. Like, it's just gonna happen. Nobody's data is perfect. And so set the expectation, you're gonna find issues with the data, and that's okay. We expect that, but then also build in a process for them to, report that, bubble that up to the people that can go do something about it. And that is the only way that in this day and age, with the amount of data that organizations are working with, it's the only way that we have any hope of being able to wrap our arms around data governance and data quality issues. You'd need a team of, well, UHG in particular would probably need Brian's team of 600 just doing that job, if there wasn't a way to democratize that responsibility. Has anyone deployed or implemented this kind of thinking, this kind of process in their organizations?
I can speak to having thousands looking at your data immediately. This is Kim. Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Kim, tell me more. Yep, we can hear you.
I do. I'm second from the top doing data analysis, migration verification for Cajun Navy Relief. And that's not how I get paid. That's a volunteer gig. I'm a CPA. But not only do we have all of our donors looking at any kind of data that we're putting out publicly, but I don't know if you've ever seen in the news, there are many different Cajun Navy relief organizations out there that all descend upon the disaster zone. And some of them are not so above board, and they've been caught at it. So now we are all under intense scrutiny. And so we've got to triple scrub those numbers before they go out, because you cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So this should be the goal, right? If a company wants to have an impact on data quality, you need to mobilize your workforce in order to assist with that. It's the only way. So that's why data governance should absolutely be a part of data literacy and roll up into the umbrella of enabling a data culture.
Did get a comment from someone who's the only data person in their division for the health department, and they found errors. People have found errors in the Tableau products that he's created and maintains. So they message or email him, and it has really helped to improve the data quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And a follow-up question is like, do they understand that they're sort of participating in part of an expected process, or is it more of the attitude like, what the heck is wrong? Like this Tableau crap, like, I'm just curious about like the attitudes behind the people that find those errors and the spirit in which they report them, because I think that mindset is a big differentiator.
I've certainly run into people who start to question the credibility of everything because they find a single error.
Yes. Yeah, mitigating that is hard but critical.
Eric says it's the first one.
The first one. Good. I had to go back and remember which one I said first, but yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Okay, let's get to myth number 5. Success is hard to measure. Who has heard that before? Like, oh, how do you measure data culture enablement? How do you measure data literacy? How do you know if it's successful or not?
Before we move on to number 5, we did have a late entry comment, which I think is important, about when they started releasing metrics that they're still maintaining now. The feedback on the errors was really critical to helping them gain a real understanding of the data.
Yeah.
Because you might not realize that there's an error or that it's wrong. And so someone else who's looking at it with different domain expertise or different perspective can really be helpful in how you can improve the quality.
Absolutely. That's a great point. That subject matter expertise, right? I could look at a number. I mean, I can go into a new client's dashboard and look at it and say, well, this looks right to me. I get a general understanding of what, online retail is, but, you have a conversation with someone who's been doing that for 20 years and they're going to tell you why it's wrong. Great point. All right, so success is hard to measure. I disagree with that mostly. I mean, there are, my general advice is don't overcomplicate it. So if we go back to that first slide and we agreed on what data culture enablement is, it's essentially getting more people to use data, right? And so don't overcomplicate it. Measure data usage, right? Like go on Tableau server statistics, or how many queries are hitting your database, or whatever tools you have available to you, take a baseline and then take another measurement at an interval that makes sense to the velocity that you're moving forward with this initiative. Of course, you can get more complicated with it because the other aspects of the definition of data culture enablement is that they're using the data effectively for the the betterment of the organization, and so that leads you to other metrics like employee engagement, profit, productivity, things like that. But once you get into those types of KPIs for the company as a whole, you're going to be fighting with other people who are also wanting to take credit for those same improvements. But so I'd say, just don't overcomplicate it. Just measure the data usage. That should be your primary measure of success for a data culture enablement initiative or a data literacy initiative. But I'd love to hear it if anyone else has found other metrics that they find really telling.
I'm going to pull on the usage thread, but I'm going to jump to solution usage. If I think of even back to the talk that I did, right? The solution is the product sitting on the shelf at Target.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime somebody clicks on it, it means they took it off the shelf. And so even some of the success measures we use are around percent of solutions used. Do you have repeat users? Just like, think of it from a retail perspective. What are the different metrics you would look at on sales? Measure those same things from a usage perspective on your solutions and equate it to the retail world, right?
Yeah.
If Target, if half the products on Target's shelf were never bought by anybody, how long would they sit there? And then I'll pull on your thread on data usage, right? What about percent of data used? How much data is sitting in all our environments that nobody ever touches? Ever?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say everybody, I'm including analytical models and all sorts of stuff that are doing, self-learning. There's a lot of the data that isn't used, and every single one of those things becomes an extra thing that's sitting on the floor in your garage that makes it harder to find everything else. So I love the usage component. I've read Laura's books, and I love how she talks about usage because I'm obsessed with it. And to me, it's the success measurement is usage.
Yeah. I love all your car references, Brian. You're not a car guy, are you?
I might still have the car I bought when I was a senior in high school. Another maybe true story.
That's impressive. But yeah, no, I completely agree. And I love the thinking about the dashboards that sit out on your Tableau server as products, right? I don't think I've run into an organization yet that looks at that information too much, right? That over manages the things that are going stale on they're sitting on their Tableau server. But I'm curious what because you can how everyone defines this is an unused dashboard differently, right? Like some people say, well, if it hasn't been looked at in 30 days, then this isn't useful. But do you have any thoughts, Brian, around how you guys define whether a solution that's available to your users is being used or unused?
Pulling directly off the BI platform usage stats. And then we actually have a Tableau dashboard that makes sense of those usage stats. And where I think a beautiful place to then mature to is, can you keep pulling on that thread and understand deeper behaviors of usage? So for example, let's say it's a beautiful dashboard that you think that people are using to answer their questions, but everybody just dumps the data out of it. Most of the BI platforms track exports. So not only do you track usage, but you say, all right, which ones of our dashboards are being used, but people don't export the data or whatever it may be. But kind of continuing to pull down that usage thread to just enrich your understanding of the behaviors, and then saying, is that a behavior we like? The behavior we don't like? Are the people we think should be using the solution actually using it or not? I mean, we've gotten to points where certain executives will use our usage stats dashboard to go check their team and be like, we built this for you. I'm holding you accountable to use that to transform your operations, and I see you're not using it. So you should probably go use that, like all of your peers.
Absolutely. One of my next presentations may be how to Marie Kondo your Tableau server environment. Like, does this bring you joy? If not, chuck it. I love it. All right. Any other comments? And we're 2 minutes away from our time here. That's it. The end. That's all I had for you guys. So if there aren't any other comments or questions, then I'm gonna stop sharing and we can wrap things up. Thank you so much, Anne, for keeping track of the chat.
You're very
Putting it down
welcome.
at the
I just have asked Brian if he could take over for me because I have to drop. So thanks
Okay.
for hosting, Serena. I think this is a really great session as always. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne. We'll see you next time. Okay, well, that's a wrap, everybody. We've got our February tug and our March tug all set to go, so you can go out to Meetup and register there, or wait for the Tableau promo emails and register when they come out too. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your Thursday evening, and thanks to Brian again for volunteering to present. And I will see you all next time.